Chief of The Drum, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to this webinar on digital strategies for a post-lockdown world. Now, it's hard to overestimate how much the world has changed, with many predicting everything from the end of the high street to the end of cash. But trying to make long-term decisions in a world where pandemic seems to have given way to a panic can be very difficult. And that's why I'm delighted to be joined by Josh Beale of MAP, who they've described themselves as the badass marketing platform. And he will aim to clarify what the main threats are and, of course, where the opportunities can be found in this new environment. But his insights are not simply based on opinion, but shaped from trends discerned from the reach of the MAP platform and its relationship with market-leading brands, as well as bespoke consumer research. So over the next 30 minutes or so, let's leave wild speculation aside and instead focus on insights based on data. Josh's aim is to help you identify the most effective strategies for navigating new normal, whatever that means. And to guarantee he over-delivers, at the end of the talk, he will explain how to download a digital marketing playbook, which summarizes 100 tactics that will help acquire, retain, nurture, and grow new customers. So, Josh, with all that in mind, do you want to maybe kick us off with your presentation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gordon. Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So, yeah, as Gordon mentioned, I'm going to be teeing up a session regarding the new normal. So I'm just going to jump straight into my slides and we'll take it from there. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining, firstly. And yeah, today we're going to look at the digital strategies for a post-lockdown world. So I'm just going to tee up the kind of agenda today, but just a little bit about myself. So I'm Josh. I'm one of our principal account directors over here at MAP, and I look after our kind of global retail and CPG, so that's consumer packaged goods strands across our business. So what does that mean? I do actually look after some pretty high profile clients myself, ranging from Homebase to PepsiCo across Europe, Edinburgh Woolen Mill Group, TNT and The Entertainer, to name a couple. But it also kind of sets our strategy across all of our retail clients and consumer goods as well across the globe as well. So hopefully today you'll find this a really interesting perspective from what kind of clients are really facing at this point, and then some strategies to take away into your day-to-day roles as well. And obviously we'll be here to assist going forwards as well. So yeah, just a little bit of an agenda today. We're going to look at the COVID-19 landscape and how this has really changed. It's been about 11 weeks now, 12 weeks now of COVID. So there has been a lot of kind of dramatic shifts from the beginning. So we're going to take it a little bit further back to the beginning of COVID and then actually what is happening right now. We're going to look at some top digital strategies implemented by successful brands. We're going to see how businesses can win in this kind of post-COVID situation. And we're actually going to really drill into this and actually say, what does a post-COVID situation look like as well? And as Gordon just mentioned, we're going to be able to look at the kind of COVID brand survey that we have done and the way that you can get these kind of 100 key digital strategies playbook as well. So I can jump straight in. So back in kind of second week of March, we were in this phase of this now kind of sorry we're closed. Stores obviously kind of went into their full lockdown mode with only essential businesses being open. 8 million users went straight onto the furlough scheme as well in the UK market, and this also happened obviously across the globe as well. So this kind of one day or a couple of week different shift where the whole world had changed was pretty immediate for businesses alike. And actually what we can see here is actually how things have kind of changed here. So this is just a picture of Times Square the day before kind of lockdown and then straight after as well. So we can see here this kind of paradigm shift between what normality was and what it became, and this kind of what hybrid are we in now. And this just is kind of nice kind of pictorial of this as well. And this is kind of what happened for consumers. Consumers obviously used to using smartphones and technology in a certain way. We went from the left-hand side where we were using our smartphones to check how busy the traffic was and the time it would take to get to work or to a destination or to a social event. But then we've started using our smartphones for kind of a completely different purpose, trying to get on these kind of online shopping queues. Trying to book a slot at Ocado or one of the many supermarkets is like trying to find a gold nugget. In a kind of panning for gold, it is that hard to get. So yeah, it's just a complete shift in user behavior, and we're all consumers at the end of the day as well. What have Matt seen here at the start? Matt actually carried out a consumer retail survey, and these are some stats that we had from this at the kind of end of March, beginning of April time. And I still think they're relevant today because it's going to shape how users and how we're coming out of this situation as well. So what do we find here? We found that 40% of consumers are trying to spend as little as possible during this time. And as a result of that, the major purchases, the house, the car, the major white goods, the big social occasion, the holiday, I'm sure we all had plans that have been interrupted, whether that be flights that we were supposed to be taking, or social events or christenings or weddings that we were supposed to be attending as well. And as a result of this, obviously, consumers are severely financially affected, and 36% of the consumers that we survey were severely financially affected. So this was around that kind of furlough, obviously reduction in earnings. There are obviously certain markets that have kind of shut down, and obviously job losses as a result as well. So there is this situation in the economic landscape. And as a result of this, 61% of users are more careful with their spend. So they're really monitoring where they're spending, and maybe those frivolous purchases, that we might be making, those kind of cups of coffee, those extravagant lunches, or just that kind of routines, things we're not purchasing anymore as well. But there is this kind of rainbow effect that we're seeing as well, that 23% of consumers have obviously converted some of their offline spend now onto online as a result. And as a result of the extra time potentially from not having to travel to work potentially as well, or working from home if you're lucky enough to still be working, there is still more potentially time in the day where users are able to browse and check for different items as well. And then there's this weird dichotomy that it's not just those users who are on the lesser end of the economic spectrum where they are severely financially affected, but there are actually some users who are impacted by actually having significantly more spend than they ever have done. They might not have to be paying for their travel or their season tickets or their train fares. They might not be having to pay for childcare at this time as well, for families as well. So yes, it can be very stressful in terms of working and childcare, and I'm sure some of us have been in those situations as well. And so users having this additional spend. So as a business, we have to really be able to identify those users who are in these different considerations, who is starting to shop with your brand for the first time because they've become an online purchaser or an online user. How many of these users are of your regular customer base are now financially affected that we can't go and market to them in the same way? And actually, as a parallel, how many of those users actually have more spend and are able to kind of make more frequent purchases with yourselves? And this is some of the language and some of the sentiment that we saw from our consumer survey. And obviously, there's a link at the end to get this as well for yourselves as well. And here's some just impacts on revenue, really. So this is looking at kind of March and April across purely kind of online retail sets. And obviously, we know that kind of offline stores being shut at this time will dramatically affect overall business revenue. However, looking from an online landscape, we can see there are obviously these kind of paradigm shifts that have happened in certain markets. The toys and gaming industry, as you can see here, have kind of had about 550% uplifts on a normal week to COVID as well. Other industries like, I don't know, tobacco and vaping, these are different ways that users are consuming these kind of goods by looking for different online or home delivery options as well. And this just looks at the average revenue across those months. So again, just instead of that week by week laydown, you can see those kind of markets that have been particularly affected. And obviously on the other side of things, you've got that flip side with the kind of travel, hospitality industries, again, obviously very severely affected by COVID, but I'm not teaching anything new by showcasing that as well. It's nice to see here just some stats around how this is kind of affecting different markets. So we have some different kind of levels from North America through to the Nordics, rest of the world as well. And you can see for your own particular market where the effects have been and where the shifts have been on a week by week basis as well, on kind of average revenues across those sectors. So I just wanted to quickly focus on a few digital strategies that help clients in recent months. These might be things that you guys are already doing or potentially are still very relevant to look at if you aren't doing so much of this at this stage. So 4 actions that have kind of addressed immediate customer needs during COVID have been this kind of focus on care and support. So businesses have really made it a priority about their own employees and community. There's been this obviously increased communication from employers to their employees around this as well. But obviously that kind of thirst and need for knowledge about what's happening with either a current order that they've made with your business or a process that they're in, if you're like on a financial products, this increased conversation that has taken place because of COVID has caused some kind of uncertainty in the market. So there's been a need to really address this. And we've seen this through lots of examples around kind of transactional mailing or increased service mailing that has happened from an email standpoint, or an informational point of view from websites, again, really saying about these are our practices for COVID, or how to get in touch, or how to use online chat or web forms to try and divert kind of users from taking up too much call center time and resource from the company side as well. So this was the first kind of tactic around focus on care and support. And as a result of this, brands have had to meet customers where they are. And as that has changed now, obviously users have been typically staying at home, not being able to visit those kind of offline locations. So this contactless operations, expanding home delivery, there has been this like kind of quick shift to here if they were not already offering these services. And if they already were offering these services as a business, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are, it's been the need to scale this to be able to meet those supply chain needs as well. Then there's kind of this transition to starting to reimagine the post-COVID-19 world, which we're definitely still in. So this is highly relevant. So this migration to digital channels to save money and boost satisfaction where possible. What's happening with kind of economic hard times as well. So these different things are really kind of topics that are still prevalent, and we're going to address some of these later on in the presentation. And at this time, there is still the need for businesses to build their technology stack or build their capability for being able to react in a quick way. So I've seen this a lot with the businesses that I've been working with. They've been using quick social media and feedback and response to really react within the next day, basically, or as quick as possible to the consumer sentiment and feedback coming through. You don't want to be posting kind of Facebook ads for your new proposition and offering if you've got horrendous supply chain needs and you're getting really negative comments as a result. So there has been a need to kind of really focus back to that kind of customer core, service those guys appropriately, increase that messaging, and then be able to kind of react to your digital strategies accordingly as well. And then I just wanted to touch on these kind of 10 brands that are getting it right. The article for The Drum as well that Gordon and the team have put together, I think it's a really nice one to show kind of just some examples of brands who have pivoted quite quickly. And I just wanted to give a little bit of reason for why they're pivoting so quickly here. So here's a couple of examples from Admiral, one for Aldermore Bank as well. And this is all around kind of trust and service level. So Admiral offering the kind of £25 refund to their customers without the need to go and apply for this. It came automatically into your bank. And it's a really nice touch for them to do this, but also it has a kind of a loyalty angle. And also a sense of kind of, we know and understand there have been less claims in the market. They are being able to give back to their users, especially from a car and van insurance perspective. And as a result of this, you can see on the right-hand side, the kind of Trustpilot reviews. There's one here that I pulled out here, which is kind of really good service, unexpected to get this monetary refund. It leaves that sense of loyalty in a market where, let's say for insurance, it has always been price driven and price sensitive. So this is a great kind of tactic that they've been able to employ, obviously taking some money off the bottom line, but due to the savings elsewhere they've been making, it kind of makes sense. But it's a great PR story, as well as a really good kind of consumer loyalty perspective, because when it comes to renewal time, I'm sure the users who are with Admiral are going to remember this and go, oh, let's go and ask for my quote again from those guys. And also you can see here again the Aldermore Bank example around the mortgage repayments. Again, it's something that has really offered a lifeline to users who are in severe financial trouble, and making this easy access, pain-free, stress-free, doing this in the right way. Again, this builds that kind of trust, the review and the score and sentiment with that brand. Next up, I just wanted to showcase some brands who are giving different kind of offers and proposition and changing their kind of tactics here as well. So we've got some examples from Coat, Unwasted, which is a brand actually in the Netherlands, who are doing these kind of consumer boxes. So direct to consumer has become very strong at this point as well. We've got Look Fantastic and Homebase as well. So just brands, again, just giving their different kind of offerings, pivoting to online where possible, and being able to give different kind of content approaches as well. The Co-Home examples are very quick, innovative process where they turned obviously from their restaurants right through into a kind of direct consumer functionality, sort of kind of localized Facebook ads close to where their existing restaurants are basically. So they did this kind of geo-local approach close to their restaurants. They know that consumers in that area obviously are aware of that brand because it's nearby, and then they targeted through Facebook, and then as a result have launched, actually this has now gone to a national operation as well. And finally, there's this kind of content approach. So I just want to showcase Sky Bet, Airbnb, Smith & Gorhey's from New Zealand, and then also Pizza Express. So where brands have not been able to resume their kind of normality or activity that they would normally expect. Obviously, Sky Bet from a sporting perspective, lots of sporting events cancelled, postponed for a considerable period of time. They're changing their content approach, making it more real, more interactive. Airbnb, obviously, with no one kind of being able to stay in different people's homes, again, have gone to this kind of content-led approach, offering screensavers, downloads, again, to keep their brand front and centric. And then we've also got some examples here from Pizza Express, leading on their kind of family arm, things to do with the kids, keeping that kind of content strategy leading while also promoting things that you could pick up in your local Sainsbury's or local supermarket as well. And the Smith & Gorhey's example is quite nice because New Zealand are a few weeks ahead in terms of getting back to normality than the UK. It's quite a nice example here just to show how, again, from an email perspective, this was how they're approaching their We Are Open. And again, it's something that we could follow coming into the next couple of days when, general retail can be opening here in the UK market as well. So definitely check out that brand if you haven't already. So yeah, what's happening now? We're kind of flipping from this kind of closed market into this open world. And this is where we sit as of June in the UK market. So this kind of change to open. So these are the strategies that we obviously are fully aware of and been drilled into us. This kind of keep socially distant, obviously 2 meters apart. How is that going to affect consumer habits? We've seen that from a offline perspective with kind of supermarkets, but this is going to migrate now into the fuller retail world, into clothing, as more kind of activity kind of opens up as well. So yeah, what are we going to see here? This is the average lockdown consumer as it stands at this point. Here is myself, a little picture of me in Homebase as it was a week or so ago. So yes, we're socially distanced. We're having kind of infrequent store visits. I read a report around kind of users are looking at kind of 10 stores that they will visit in a monthly period. I think it's 10.4, the average. So there's only 10.4 occasions where users are going to be able to visit. And why would they go and visit your brand over something else? So there's that kind of immediacy or need here. Obviously, users are adhering to personal protection guidelines. Here you can see my face mask covering, 2 meter distancing here as well. We're obviously utilizing click and collect services or digital services to reduce time in store. And these operative kind of measures are things that brands are obviously looking into more and trying to increase capacity where they can do here as well. And consumer obviously is always in need of a haircut unless you've managed to turn your spouse or your flatmate into a different kind of haircut or just a different profession that they have managed to gain over the lockdown period. So yeah, this is the average lockdown consumer, and I think we're all in this same boat at the same time. I saw this online. I thought this was a nice kind of segue into the next piece where we're usually used to crossing the road together, as this road sign says, and now we're going to be in this world of doing everything kind of socially distant. And this isn't here to change. So we have to adapt our digital technologies for sure to suit these needs, but also our offline needs as well. So I just thought that was quite a relevant one. So just from a UK search perspective, looking at some Google trends, I found this quite fascinating, that the weather is now starting to trend over coronavirus in the UK. So this is in terms of Google search terms. And also obviously news always been prevalent for people asking for news type articles, but that shift now where people are more thinking about the weather, thinking about outdoors over the kind of coronavirus, it shows how users have kind of changed their behavior over time. And the bottom kind of graph here also shows when people were thinking about when will coronavirus end versus when will lockdown end. And I think this is a really interesting kind of perception again, that as the weeks have gone on, users have not thought about the vaccine so much for coronavirus and how we are going to stop this. They're now thinking about how we can go get out of lockdown and how we can actually get back to some form of normality, but without it being the kind of back to the usual existence which we would be used to in maybe a January or February, where we could go wild, see everyone that we wanted to do, and take our holidays or vacations as normal. So again, this is just a good thing to have a little look at and see how consumers are changing. But this kind of approach now to when will lockdown end, other things that are kind of beginning to come front and center for most of our kind of consumers at this point. So we're just going to move on to this kind of how will businesses win post COVID-19 kind of phase. And it's kind of the majority of the talk today. We want to look at the kind of strategies that we're going to fit here. But anything that we do implement needs to fit what we will call a yo-yo consumer landscape. And the reason why we're calling this yo-yo consumer landscape is that any strategies that we implement, let's say digitally at this time, need to fit for both a lockdown world and the return to normal world. There could be secondary, tertiary peaks that are going to be happening with COVID. So we need to be able to pivot our strategies accordingly. Hence this kind of yo-yo approach that we're kind of coining here. So these are 3 tactics that you guys should be doing now, or do to hopefully have some continued success or further success down the line as well. So as we know, shopping habits may have permanently changed. And there are some examples that I'll come on to which kind of testament to this as well. So this ability to identify and segment users now based upon their COVID behavior is going to be vitally important. Unfortunately, if you were severely affected in March and April by COVID, in June, you are still going to be severely financially affected by COVID. So we have to really identify those key consumer sets within your business that have this kind of behavioral aspect as well that has changed. So if we can segment and target those users, whether that be through email, whether it be that through paid media, whether it be through Facebook, we have to kind of change our marketing kind of discussions and approaches to these different consumer sets. And the businesses who are able to really pivot on their behavior are going to be able to win here as well. As a result of this segmentation, you obviously need to communicate and personalize accordingly. So you need to communicate these different kind of methods where users can now shop with your brand in a clear and concise way. So whether that be through your online channels, whether it be about click and collect, whether it be about your in-store approach, but also kind of personalizing accordingly. And personalization doesn't just mean addressing it to myself being Josh as my first name. It means personalization around geolocation. Where are my nearest stores? How can you help me assist in my purchasing habit? How can you make click and collect easier? Personalizing it to me based upon my experience with your brand. And then finally, really using data-led insights is something we believe strongly in at MAP, as this will help you react and adapt your business strategy. So decisions, and I think for the better, have been made in a really swift decision-making process because businesses have got quite lean with furloughs that have happened and furloughs that have taken place. And actually, they've been able to react so quickly. I've seen people switch on PPC on and off strategies like within an hour or 2 hours when lines are kind of not available for purchase or supply chain has broken down somewhere. Businesses have had to react really quickly. So all of this reaction needs to be continued because we're getting live data and feedback all the time from our consumers. So the businesses who are able to see this are going to be able to leverage this within their marketing that they're going to be able to do, and also kind of make change quickly to supply chain as well. So I just wanted to touch on the first one, which is around segmenting the users based upon COVID. So hopefully people have seen this type of graph before, but this is similar to the new kind of government track and trace for COVID-19. Businesses have to be able to join the online consumer to their marcoms tools, their marketing tools. I just really want to stress that point. So you've got to join your online consumers to your marcoms tools. If this link is not made between these two kind of facets, we're really not understanding the consumer and where they are within our life cycle with our brand. And this basically means that we need to tie the user's first-party cookie, so this is what's happening on your website, to maybe your marketing outputs, whether that be email address, whether that be to your data marketing platform, whether that be to your Google ID. These things, these kind of ties to the user are so important now. And being able to do this in a landscape where ITTP laws were in as well, or cookie laws were changing, we need to be able to own that first party data as a business. So this is something that is really crucial, and being able to understand what's just happened online, what their browsing behavior is, how that has changed, how a user has potentially made their first purchase during COVID, what will that mean for them to be a long-standing becoming a long-standing advocate for your brand. These are all things that, again, by joining up that online consumer with your purchasing data through your online tools and your marketing channels, you can really get a kind of holistic going on there as well. And this can also approach into things like RFM. So RFM is being commonly used, recency, frequency, monetary, but just really understanding how users are moving between these areas. And this is just an example from one of the map digital tools that we have available in our intelligence stack. So loyal customers, promising customers, drifting customers, how users are moving between these and how has behavior changed. Maybe you had a hyper loyal user in January, February, who just were not able to be hyper loyal to your brand during March, April, May, June, for instance. Does that mean that that user will become loyal again, or have they permanently moved away? We really do need to identify these consumer sets and really test and trial our kind of different marketing strategies as a result of this. Next up, just wanted to again just show you a bit of a different dashboard view here. But again, how are my users coming in from email or from social? How has that behavior changed? Where are my direct referral URLs coming from? How are my affiliates working? Who's bringing traffic? Where are users in that funnel approach? Are we having more basket abandons? Are we having stronger conversion rates because users are seeing that goods are available and they don't want to wait because it could go out of stock pretty quickly, and therefore are not abandoning the session, not bouncing away from your page and converting more quickly? If you guys are on top of these metrics and are able to see this within your business, again, you can adapt your marketing strategies accordingly. And here's just a quote from kind of the Sainsbury's CEO, Mike Coop, just showing how behaviors change from a Sainsbury's perspective, and some nice stats from Kantar as well. So they're seeing now a third of their sales are through their Smart Shop app. I'm sure we've all used that now within the supermarket, where you're scanning your products, not having to go to checkouts. And they've already seen that this will be a paradigm shift. The latest figures in some of the consumer research from shopping is that online sales for shopping was around about 6 to 7% in the market. That has now gone up to 13 to 14% online shopping, and the prevalency of over 65s now spending on groceries online has increased by 94% during COVID. A lot of these brands are saying that they don't think that this will change. So they've had to radically reproposition their business. And you can also see that with some of the new tie-ups that have been happening with people like Aldi and Deliveroo, I believe. So yeah, different types of things are happening in the market to get the goods to consumers in a completely different way. So this kind of fundamental shift to digital is something that has kind of accelerated that transformation, probably 2 to 3 years, is what the market is saying as well. So here's just a picture of the Smart Shop app, again, just for reference as well. So again, as a result of this, we do need to communicate and personalize accordingly. So how has our communication time changed as a result of COVID and people maybe working from home or being at home longer? How has our browsing patterns changed? There has been this kind of shift to this kind of 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon browsing time, where people have been working all day potentially, or been on furlough or whatever it may be, have that time in the day, and they're seeing a lot of consumer engagement between this time. So how has that changed? That time changed, and what do weekends now mean if the weekends are exactly the same as the week, for instance, if you haven't been working? So there is this kind of different shift as well about how users are looking at their time. So truly knowing where they are and what the best channel is for these kind of timings is best to reevaluate. I'm sure this is something that we've all done as marketers in the past. But again, let's come back to this. Let's relook at it for the COVID world. Let's see where our consumer engagement is happening for those different consumer sets, and then again, market accordingly on the different channels. And also, as a result of this, can you ask yourself the question, are you able to suppress kind of paid media or more expensive channels for your own channels, and maybe try and communicate via your own channels first? It might be something that you can now do as a result of really understanding your customer and where they're engaging on. Maybe you can go to some of your own channels before going out to retarget those users or pay Google for that customer again as well. Again, I know I mentioned Coat earlier on an example. It's something that I have used and I personally did like their service. So again, this kind of communication and personalization, the Coat to your door, the value add that these guys give with their service, kind of giving away a free product as part of that journey, looking for customer feedback and sentiment, and they're getting a really positive response in the marketplace as well. So again, this is a business who have completely pivoted. Just an example from one of the clients here of ELC, a learning center. And again, as we're starting to work back into this kind of store approach, these are kind of geolocation store banners when you open up your emails as well. You'll be able to see what your local store times are now going to be, how you can go and find those businesses. So again, trying to make things easier for the consumer, personalizing, like I say, not in a first name type of way, but in kind of a real localized way, as an instance here. This is an example just from Homebase as well. Again, just showing how we are trying to give that information to the customer here. And you can see at the bottom here, we've got these different kind of delivery times and delivery costs that are items, again, that are available and not available in stores. And these pivot in and out depending on whether stores are open. This was taken just prior to some of the essential stores being reopened, and also how many people are browsing that as well. Also, this consumers, when this is coming into your inbox, for instance, from an email perspective, it's always live. So it's always going to have what stock levels are available, what's available in store, what the delivery lead times. So we don't have that huge amount of abandonment on those purchases because we set that expectation from the marketing output. And again, we're leveraging that on-site technology and the behavior of our customers and giving that information back to the customer set. You can see how many people have been browsing this, for instance, as well. So again, it's a nice example of showing kind of real-time stock in emails, but also aiding that consumer journey from a marketing standpoint as well. Final point on this one was around kind of using data-led insights. So again, this is something that we can see here where users are falling through this funnel. So shopping on site, looking at different kind of visits from the product views, adding to cart, and then conversion. So if we really understand what has changed from our online behaviors as well, and where users are either dropping out the funnel or being added into the funnel at different steps, we can then try and market accordingly. So again, look at this kind of funnel breakdown for your user set and see how this has changed as well. And again, once we know these users and where they are in the funnel, we can adapt our marketing strategies accordingly as well. So yeah, just from a data perspective, can you get your business aligned on the same digital KPIs? This is a good time to be able to have these kind of conversations across channel as well. So whether that be SEO, whether that be PPC, whether that be social or email, it's a good time to have these conversations with brands or internally to say, can we align now? Because there's been so many shifts that have happened to identify businesses and realign kind of your own business strategies. It's a good time to try and get everyone on the same level playing field, so we really understand the cross-channel approach. And then also really understanding kind of how important are those customers gained during COVID-19? What is their return rate? What are the average days between visit? These are types of questions that we should be asking ourselves. And if we can ask these and see the data for this, then we can again react accordingly. If we don't have this information about how a particular customer set is happening, then we're a little bit blind to everything that's coming from that as well. Okay. Cool. So I just wanted to show you again just some of the different tools or different kind of metrics that people are using at this moment. So focusing on return rate and repeat order rate, looking at this for the newly acquired customers, I just mentioned, again, things that will be really beneficial to set out independent marketing strategies for these users. I'll give you an example. I was buying some spirits online, for instance, for my bar. And it's a completely different market that I've never purchased online before. But I'm even unsure myself, will I return to the supermarkets to buy spirits? Will I use this brand again? I had a great experience, but is that enough to make sure that I'm going to be an online consumer for purchasing spirits for my bar in the future? And these are questions I don't even know that myself. So as a business, we need to really kind of tailor into those strategies. So as a business, I'm still ambivalent to being offline or online. If I get some really strong marketing from the online company, with maybe some offers or just awareness things or kind of upsells or cross sells based upon my previous purchase history, I'm quite likely to go and use that service again because it was very direct to my door, obviously from an online perspective, and I had a satisfying experience through the purchasing funnel. So again, things that we can look. That's just a testimony for myself, but this is what you need to ask yourselves as your business: like, how have the people that we've acquired changed their behavior as a result? Next up, we just want to look at the kind of performance of our campaigns, and this has completely changed as a result. So look at different fluctuations from the inbound traffic sources, whether that be email, whether that be SEO, and see how users have changed as a result. Are journeys being less convoluted because they're coming much more direct and then not dropping off and then purchasing? So again, look at those identification sources, where they're coming inbound from, and maybe adjust your spends accordingly of what you're doing within these channels as well, because there has been some massive behavioral shifts of users as well. Next up, again, you want to review your things like add to cart rate and abandonment tactics as a result of COVID, and then change the product performance and maybe the recommendations that you're servicing alongside these kind of products as well. And next up, you just really, if you can, try and break down the role of each channel for different areas of your segmentation or your product strategy as well. So if you can really understand that email is an in-between touch point for a purchase for this type of purchase category, for instance, of your product sets online, then again, you can really tailor your strategies with an email to try and tee up everything that would then come back for let's say a PPC ad to go and do the kind of finishing and closing job. Or whether you go, oh, actually, this is much more of a long-term product, needs much more kind of consumer impact, and therefore we're going to change our Pinterest strategy accordingly to be much more high-level and inspirational, and we're going to follow that up with kind of much more direct social targeting as a result of that, maybe through Facebook to be a bit more of a closing channels. So again, looking at the review of the marketing mix is really important, and it's not just marketing mix across your whole business, it's across different product sets and areas. Because yeah, you have different products and lines on your website, or your clients do if you're an agency as well, and therefore it's really interesting to investigate this at a kind of a granular level, or as granular as you can possibly do as well. So just to close on this, I just want to say, obviously, remember the technology decisions made now, all your marketing strategies need to fit this yo-yo consumer landscape. So you can buy into technology that can work in both different sets, from being in the COVID world and back to kind of post-COVID, let's say, the new norm, as you'll be hearing in the press as well. But yeah, this kind of adoption of this kind of yo-yo consumer landscape, if we can set our strategies to be able to identify users now, it's never going to be a bad thing, which we can then pivot our business around. Cool. So I'm just going to tee up last kind of couple of points here, just a few downloadable resources for yourselves to kind of take away. So MAP undertook a COVID brand survey, and this is some of the stats that we alluded to at the start, around the 1,200 UK consumers. So by all means, go to this bit.ly link here to download that full survey. It's well worth a read. As you're doing that download, we will also potentially ask some questions around what your brand has seen and heard as a result of COVID. And we've collected already about 150 responses from brands as well who have gone through this survey. But by all means, I would really like you guys to go and do that and tell your own personal experience of what your brand has seen during COVID. We'll also donate to a charity of your choice, which you can pick through the kind of the function here. And as a result, you'll also get the consumer survey. So by all means, do that as well. Gordon teed this up at the start, but this is a really useful asset guide for yourselves, and this is just an extract from it here. But yeah, we've just created this kind of 100 tactics to help you acquire, nurture, grow, and retain your customers. Some of which you might be already doing, but there is a lot of good kind of informational and instructional options to do through this tool. So by doing this, you will download the playbook, but also there's this interactive component on here where you can build your own tailored marketing strategies out, and then take this back to maybe your superiors, your bosses, or your next digital marketing strategy, or your board meeting, to go and say, actually, these are things that we're not implementing now, and potentially we should be doing that as well. So yeah, check out this playbook here, and then use that interactive kind of builder to build out your marketing strategy. I do know that we have quite a few agency partners on the webinar today, so I just thought I'd make a little nod to this. Obviously, MAP as a business, we do work with a lot of agencies, a few here listed on the right-hand side. So some who resell our MAP Cloud function and technology platforms, and then use this for their own clients as well. MAP also have a big media division around lead generation and things that we can offer as well. So yeah, if this type of information has been interesting, again, agency partners, please do get in touch as well. And I'm just going to put the one obligatory slide on who we are and what we're made of, because just to give a bit of quantity and quantifying why we're talking today. So MAP Cloud consists of kind of 4 components. Our MAP Engage tool, which is around our email and SMS and push notifications, all kind of real-time and automated kind of Marcoms platform. We've got our Acquire, which is around on-site consumer behavior, which you can then have a little look through, and it monitors all the events, what's happening, and we can push that back to our Engage platform from an execution perspective, or maybe out to different third parties like Facebook or GDN, Google Display Network, or kind of AppNexus, again, to do your ad buy strategy here as well. We've got our customer insights. I did show you a few dashes from that earlier, but that's around kind of understanding where the customer is in their life cycle. And the really cool thing around that piece allows us to take those different segments and not just see what users are doing, but then actually action that through our Engage platform. So we can push those segments of users and then go and market to them. And then we've got our Ecom Plus tool, which is around the behavioral elements. So you saw that there in the Homebase example with the kind of the back in stock emails, price drops, abandonment campaigns, recommendations as well. So I'll leave it there. I don't want to talk too much, but that just gives you some concepts of kind of who map our business and the services as well. And this is just a couple of slides on who we are, a few of our brands and logos at the bottom and where we're based. And yeah, that's it from me. So yeah, I'll hand it back to Gordon. Hope you found that relevant.
Josh, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much. And I know our attendees will probably be very keen to ask you a few questions. And in a moment or two, we're going to cross over and allow them to do just that. But before we do, I've got one or two questions myself. I think we've got time for at least one. You did manage to sort of squeeze in the term paradigm shift at least once into your presentation. And I just really wanted to get what you reading all your data. I actually think we are entering an era of a new normal, or maybe are we going back to an old normal with a few extra twists?
Yeah, I think that the landscape has changed. I think we have to recognise this, but I don't think there is any one industry expert who is going to tell us what the path is going to be for the next 12 to 18 months at this time. There are obviously a lot of literature out there, McKinsey reports that are very valid about showing what's happened with consumer sentiment. But I think we have from the business leads at this point, and like the Mike Coop CEOs of Sainsbury's of this world, they have seen that shift through the data that they have been seeing. All the businesses that I've been analysing and work with have seen some form of shift. We're not saying that the offline world is not going to be relevant, but we just think that there is this kind of joining of the online digital strategy that is going to be escalating. I'll give you an example that all the financial products around kind of mortgages and repayments and things like this, and those journeys around loans and applications, they have gone from 10% digital to 90% digital in 10 weeks. And what has made it easier for customers is that these experiences have been met really well, and it's been easier and more frictionless. So why would we go back to that time where we have everything going back through branch? It just doesn't make sense. So I think for certain journeys and certain businesses, this move to online has sped up, and therefore it is here to stay. And then we are coming obviously into this uncertain time, because as we come out of furlough, there will be this kind of recession that we know will be, we don't know how deep, but we know it will be quite deep. So that this shift of consumer behavior, I think, is all around how businesses identify. And if we identify well now, then segments, we can convert them to be constantly an online customer. And that just sometimes have quite a lot of cost saving and benefits to an organization. So I think organizations might have to get leaner. They might be some, again, high street closures. We've seen it for the last couple of years as well. So these type of things will happen, but I think what COVID has done is sped this up, and therefore we have to react. As hopefully I've shown a few examples of how to do that today.
Suggest there is a bit of a pent-up demand amongst consumers. They're sort of spending less. And sort of going forward into this sort of recession you mentioned there, have you any sense of what sort of recession you can expect? Do you reckon it's going to be a V-shaped recession, or maybe a bathtub-shaped recession, or an L-shaped or an I-shaped? Goodness only knows. Have you any sense of what to expect?
I think, again, yeah, it depends. It depends who you ask. Obviously, I'm not the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but I think from my perspective, we have seen it within businesses. There has been this kind of decline in kind of overall revenues. Even if online revenues have gone up exponentially 400, 500%, it doesn't cater for having 200 stores closed. However, with those businesses and ones that I'm privy to who have reopened, they are seeing, as you say, there is pent-up demand. People do want to get back to socially interacting and visiting their local stores and having that convenience and being able to browse and shop as they used to do. And there is a real spend that is coming with that. So I think, again, it will become industry specific as to where the deepest cuts are. things like fashion, for instance, maybe like luxury goods, where you just don't need to make that purchase. It's a bit more frivolous. Are things where people will actually say, actually, I don't need that now. I will wait. That expensive holiday that they were going to go on, maybe they will cut that back. And I say it's local, that will help our local economy in different areas. So I think there will be different industries and sectors that are going to be more badly affected, but also we would like to hope that some of our local, let's say, tourist markets like Cornwall and all these different types of things will benefit from the fact that we won't be all visiting maybe a broad destination. So again, as a whole, taking it as a whole economy, there will be an obvious decline. We will experience some job losses, and quite severe job losses, I would expect, once the furlough scheme goes. But also we will hopefully see much more nimble and agile businesses that have come as a result. And some of the traditional established brands have had to adapt quickly, and if they haven't adapted, they will get overtaken by quite a lot of these digital challenger brands. So the online pure players who have that supply chain already worked out, it's already been created. Car manufacturers are also looking at, for instance, taking things much more close to home rather than always relying on kind of China and different places. So there has been this complete shift in supply chain needs to be much more local. Can we do this in our local market as well? So it might also help bring everything nearer rather than kind of offshoring. They're calling it now onshoring. So maybe we can take some of those learnings as well. I think that will all impact what the economic state will look like. But I think as a nation, we do want to get back to some form of normality. And with that will be continue to spend as much as we can do. And let's hope that that helps us turn the corner like we did in 2008, 2009 as well.
Well, that's great, Josh. Well, thanks again for all your input. I really enjoyed the presentation today. But of course, we're not finished yet. So let's maybe invite some questions from our attendees. Well, actually, a few questions have been flooding in, but before I start, I should say that the 2 points I put to you were also running in the form of some online polls, and we asked our attendees about whether or not they thought a V-shaped recession was likely, and unfortunately only 30% were optimistic and said a V-shaped thing was probably going to happen. So a little bit of doom and gloom there. But however, on the second question, we basically asked them whether or not the fundamental changes we're seeing now in consumer behaviour are likely to become part of the new normal. And I think over 70% agreed that the fundamental changes will persist. So that's pretty interesting. But as I said, over to maybe get some questions from our audience, and I'm going to start off with quite an easy one for you actually, because it's quite factual. But Louise Holland asked, is the average revenue slide, where you talk about toys and games, she really wants to know if your figures include esports.
Yeah, so that's actually a slide from one of our kind of partner agencies in there as well. So I don't know the core stats. It was across the whole kind of client set of toys and gaming. So I have to check that one out individually. Pretty sure it's anything that's retail and sellable online across our kind of client base. So that's where those kind of stats have come from. So I need to check around that the kind of the weighted proportions of those different kind of businesses that make up that toys and gaming sector. But as we know, as generalistic terms, the kind of esports, I've seen a lot of reports around gaming of PlayStation versus Xbox and coming into PS5 and these different timings as well. That gaming market has exploded as a result of the kind of stay-at-home culture. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if those markets have not even seen that amount of growth. I would think theirs will be exponentially above as well in terms of that online gaming and esports. Yeah, and I think we're going to see an awful lot more data coming out in gaming because there's obviously been a lot of fascinating trends in that market. But moving on, Ify actually asked a few questions, but including he really wants to know, he thought that your slide on expenditure changes was really interesting, and you looked at obviously segmentation, but he really wants to know are traditional segmentation approaches
irrelevant now. Are new segmentation models available where we can perhaps look at income and time, which is the two big changes in consumer behaviour?
Yeah, I guess this depends on the access to third-party data, like the kind of cool credits of this world or Experian data sets, those rich data sets, whether you're able to get that out in the open market as to whether you're going to be able to have that type of data which you can overlay on your data sets. So if you have those links already, I can't answer for those businesses, but I'm sure there are that data and stats are starting to come through and maybe coming onto the market from a ad perspective. So you might be able to overlay some of those data sets. I think where my segmentation strategy kind of formulation comes from is much more around identification within your own first-party data sets. So what I would say is that buckets have changed, like you have your loyal customers, you have your frequent visitors, you have your returning, you have your new users. But I think what you have to do is identify how users have changed from pre-COVID to post-COVID. Because a pre-hyper loyal user, as I mentioned in the presentation, might not be able to be a loyal user during the kind of furlough time. So it doesn't mean that they are now against your brand, but you might be able to win them back and get them back to be that hyper loyal customer again. But what we can do, and I think would be really good to do, is look at a study within your consumer purchases of who has become a purchaser during these last 12, 13 weeks of COVID time, and who have you turned from being a first-time purchaser to maybe a second or tertiary purchaser during that time. You've created a really potentially loyal customer in a 2 to 3 week period, and then what do you go and do about that? So yeah, there'd be some really interesting case studies for any business that is out there. Let's say there was an online card retailer like a Paperchase. If you've started having that experience with buying online, has that consumer now set in? Is that something that we would do again because that was easy and I didn't take an hour and a half of my morning on a Saturday to go around a card shop and pick up these cards? So again, it's different for every single business, but yeah, that's some of the things that I would look at is how consumer set have changed, and especially purchasing habits, and then how you can curate that with your marketing techniques now to be kind of developing those users through, because some really clever bits of marketing at this stage will really help your users going forwards as well and become potentially loyal advocates in a post kind of COVID world or when retail reopens, these type of things as well.
Yeah, it's really fascinating times, isn't it? Really, it really sense we're living through history here. I think we'll look back and think we're very lucky to be alive during this period. But anyway,
to be alive, I think is a good thing.
Right. But Mark Tucker, had another issue around third-party cookie legislation, which he obviously mentioned. But he was just wondering what can brands do to overcome the challenges around that.
Yeah, so it does come down to technology, unfortunately here. It comes down to the technology tools that you have available in your stack. So with some of the laws, it's all about tracking on that first half made. So on your own company website, using third-party analytics tools, they will only get so far in your consumer set. Unfortunately, like the Googles of this world, they don't track 100% of your data for 100% of the time. So if you have like a big consumer set, lots of traffic or even small traffic, you are taking some averages if you are reliant on some of these tools. So if you can start tracking at first party level, whether that be through a data management platform, whether that be through some kind of first party intelligence software, then that will give you more insight and kind of eyes on what is really happening. And then if you can utilize that data and kind of leverage that, even better. So yeah, that's where you need to have a little look at, because otherwise you get hit by the 7-day Safari cookie day window expiry, and trying to tie up customers when their cookies are constantly expiring. You keep thinking they're a returning brand new visitor when they're not. They're actually a hyper loyal person who's had their cookies refreshed. So that tie to your kind of key marketing, like whether that be your email address, like I mentioned, the Google ID, DMP cookie. It's a bit technical, but yeah, trying to get that all onto one level. And if you can contain that or own that piece of information at domain level, then you can keep adding all that history to that same individual user without it being cached and refreshed. Is basically what we're getting at.
Yeah, and Alec asked actually quite an interesting question, which I suppose goes to the heart of a lot of the activity. He's seen as obviously, I mean, the community as a whole has gravitated towards digital. And you saw the stats between in terms of older people doing their shopping digitally now for the first time. But he was saying, obviously, there's two groups. You've got people who've been forced into behaving in digital because of the crisis, and people who always liked digital. But how do you tell a difference between these two groups, really? And do we actually believe that the reluctant digital converts will remain converted after this is all over?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point. It is gonna take some pretty deep data insight to have a little look at this. I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this through AOV, whether you're going to be able to see it even from their first purchase date. You can make a few assumptions that someone who's had to do something a certain way because of a forced journey has a kind of a COVID kind of banner across their head, and therefore you should treat them slightly different to someone who was in this demographic before and had that experience, let's say, out of choice rather than being forced. So I think it does come down to a little bit of data analysis, but you could do it at a very basic level, just looking at those kind of first purchase order dates, trying to model your data on a frequency basis from there, and then adjust your marketing accordingly. So I think I'm not going to be able to answer fully how you're going to find that data, but yeah, you might have to take some arbitrary standpoints such as like first order date, looking at AOVs, and see if you've managed to get a first order in. Have they then raised their AOV on their second occasion because they have more confidence with your brand, they know the goods will arrive, and they've had that strong experience, then they might be willing to kind of invest more in that channel. Whether they go back, again, I haven't even decided on some of my journeys whether I'm going back yet. So how a business is going to do it is going to be exceedingly hard, but I think we can only identify what users are doing now, and through hopefully clever marketing or some form of upsell or content strategy or some form of value add that you're giving them, it gives them that reason to have that same experience again. And we're not going to know the full fallout until it's all been done. So that's where I'd say.
And obviously, if it's a tale of two sort of consumer sets, it's also maybe a tale of two business sets. Because you do, I mean, your presentation was, one or two people point out it's very sort of e-commerce focused. But Alba's really asking the question, but what happens if you run a sort of business that couldn't operate during the lockdown? Can you apply a lot of your insights and lessons to maybe service-led businesses such as restaurants and pubs? What advice would you give them? Yeah,
I've seen some really innovative examples. I was literally walking down to pick my son up from nursery, and I had a pub which was open in St Albans, which had one person in and filling up plastic bottles of local brewed ciders and beers. They are trying to change their business model during this time to still survive, which is kudos to them, and it's great that the local communities are supporting them. Hospitality and staying is much harder, obviously. If it's not physically allowed, then you can't come up with some concept to try and keep your business running. But what I think there will be is this kind of outpouring of support. We've seen this, especially with the UK nationality and kind of what we want to believe in. We want to help our local businesses. There will be that calling for support local when we are able to as well. So I think there will be that pushback into those kind of societies, because we don't want to lose those key businesses, because if they're not around, then no one can enjoy them. So I think we are going to have to change our ways. Hospitality's got probably the hardest job here. But people do still want to have experiences. People are getting, let's say, bored of being at home all this time and just going out to their 10.4 shops a month and trying to stay socially distanced and visit their park. They want to go to attractions. I think zoos are opening and different things are starting to open. So it will be interesting to see those leading businesses and how much kind of draw they still have. But I'm sure that the kind of the sense and the nostalgia of the consumer public will want to help those businesses. So hopefully there are ways that they can still trade, especially if you're not an e-com business. But maybe some of the awareness tactics that you can do, maybe some of the Facebook advertising or local support or calling for kind of local businesses to kind of help here as well, or maybe doing some tie-ups between some other complementary businesses in your local area. So if you're a hospitality trade, then tying up with local food producers or whatever it may be, something local which kind of brings everything together, that community feel is going to help your business kind of have that airtime and get that publicity that you need to hopefully regenerate your business. So just different ideas like that might help if you're a completely offline e-com business as well.
That's right. I know. I think we've got time for maybe another couple of questions, so let's ask them quickly. But actually, thanks everybody once again for submitting so many questions. It's been really helpful, and it's good to get your feedback. But I think it was Sammy who's really asking specifically. I mean, education's in the news on all levels today. You know, a big controversy here in the UK about schools not going back maybe until September. But Sammy's really asking about higher education. And is there any sort of, specific opportunities for the higher education market?
Yeah, well, that's a big one. So higher education, it's quite tough. Obviously, there's been a lot of news articles about higher education saying that potentially the whole of the next academic year is going to be all going to be virtual. And then it's going to be about trying to justify the spend, let's say the tuition fees, the expenditure at this time for not having that kind of physical experience. It's going to be very, very tough. So I guess it's all going to come down to the resources that you guys are able to provide, maybe the takeaways, maybe more webinars, maybe thought leadership, being like higher education, giving access to digital leaders or whatever the course enrolls in, like being able to bring experts into those kind of facets of learning. I think that additional value add is going to be more and more important for higher education to say, why would this course be much more of a differential over this course? Previously, it was about the experience. Maybe it's about the name of the university or the college or the achievement that you're going to get at the end or the proposed weighting of it. So I guess from that perspective, it's not an area that I do a lot of work in, to be honest, but I think, you've got to try and differentiate yourself. And if you've got a great learning resource tool, make it extremely easy for your users, have a community feel that's available on your higher education pages, you create that community in an online world. These are things that will help you stand out from your competitors in that set and create that engagement. That's probably what I would say at this point.
That's great. And one last question to end on. I know we're running slightly over, but I think it's a nice positive. It's one of the big insights from today. Is Hannah's really asking it, really, since the world is moving towards digital, is this moment in time a fantastic opportunity for the digital industry to really to push forward and sort of offer new services, new experience, new insights for its clients?
Yeah, I think, of course, the world is open and the consumers are very open to buying in these means and these channels now. So yes, it's risky because of financial backings and all that type of stuff, but there is a lot of stuff that's still happening in the market and people still want to progress. And there's a lot of really interesting, and you see it on LinkedIn and all these things where users are coming up with new innovative angles to help. For instance, I saw someone who was on furlough, just reading through my scroll this morning actually, and they were helping their local high street, for instance, and set up and joined up all 100 businesses on their local high street and started to try and create an e-commerce channel for those 100 businesses on their local high street. I'm thinking, well, such a great thing to be doing. While someone's been on furlough, they've kind of pivoted, and this might become their business going forward. So where there's strain, there's opportunity, as always. Challenger brands are coming through. Offering these nimble services. So I think e-commerce is obviously always going to be there, but it's now becoming much more of that proportion of the taking off that offline spend. Obviously it will do during these times, but I still think it's going to have a greater effect over the next couple of months as well. It's not going to retreat back to where it was. It will still have more of a online focus. So if you've got those digital channels, digital tools, availability to go direct to consumer, if you're FMCG, that's where they're all going. So I think, you need to get on the train pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, that's great, Josh. I think that's all we've got time for. But on that quite positive note, thanks for all your help, all your insights, and thanks to everybody for listening in and sending us your questions. Just a quick reminder: obviously, we've got these two great resources you can download, which deals with the best digital tactics and also the consumer research. And we will send everybody who's been on this call the links just shortly afterwards. But anyway, thanks again. Thanks to Josh. Thanks to Matt. And thanks to everybody for taking part.
Cool. Thanks, guys.